Let's go back to the work you're doing at Sense Foundation and do the wonderful things that you love doing at every discussion, which is the philosophical, societal, and cultural issues, which is something that always comes up. So let's very quickly.
I'm in Britain now. I'm back in the country where they have this thing called sarcasm. Okay.
Well, that and Brexit. So quite frankly, living forever is kind of low on the agenda. But look, you dismiss the idea that life is given meaning through death. Why? Let's just run through these really quick, Aubrey.
Because it's bullshit.
All right, I'm going to say that.
It has zero semantic content, right? I mean, there is nothing there.
All right, there's a counter argument for that. But look, isn't there a religious or theological argument for what you are arguing? Isn't this whole idea just an extension of Judeo-Christian religion? Instead of going up to the clouds to see the big guy in the sky, we just get to continue our life on this planet. This is the rational response to a post-theist world.
Yeah, that's bullshit too, but for a much better reason.
Can you explain why?
Yeah, sure. Namely that we're not supposed to commit suicide. We're not supposed to kill each other, right? So the Holy Scripture is perfectly clear about this. We're supposed to let God decide when we go there, right? And if we fix our health, that's, last I checked, God was supposed to be omnipotent, which means that he can perfectly well strike anyone down with a thunderbolt, however healthy they are. Whereas, conversely, one thing that is very clear in all Holy Scriptures is that what we're supposed to be doing down here is minimizing suffering. And it's unequivocally clear that aging causes far more suffering than anything else in today's world. Therefore, ergo, by one's own definition, namely what's written down in Holy Scripture, it would be a sin not to be working to eliminate aging.
All right, let's do this classic one. Wouldn't living forever be boring? Or do you believe in what Max Moore is kind of arguing, which is, look, let's just reinvent ourselves every 80 years ad infinitum?
We're reinventing ourselves all the time. We forget things a lot, but we forget the things that we don't care about. I absolutely can only remember the names of less than half of the people I went to high school with. And that doesn't bother me in the slightest. Whereas conversely, I know perfectly well that, 50 years from now, there's a fair chance that I will meet people that I haven't met for 50 years, and they will be completely different people, and it will be just as much fun as it would have been if they were exactly the same person as they had been the previous time I met them.
I want to go back a little bit to what you said about suicide. So what strikes me about your mission is if you give people the option to live indefinitely, then you also at the same time have to advocate for things like euthanasia. You have to give them the option of when they want to leave this planet. Or as some science fiction writers have argued, what we'll do surprise suicide parties where their friends will get together and kill them by surprise to give back that element of surprise around death. Now, where do you stand? Don't you believe that at least ethically you should also be advocating for euthanasia at the same time that you advocate for longevity?
All right. So, first of all, euthanasia, in case you hadn't noticed, is the discussion around euthanasia almost entirely revolves around the choice to die of people whose quality of life is not only really low, but has no realistic prospect of ever returning to good health. That is not the question that we are discussing here, because we're talking about longevity as a side effect of good health. So then the question is, well, okay, supposing, however, that even if people are in good physical and mental health, nevertheless they get so sick of life that they still want to die. Now,
it's been 200 years of Brexit and Trump. You know what? I'm out this month.
So today we have the concept of suicide. It happens. People get that way. And, people's loved ones don't get prosecuted for the fact that their loved ones committed suicide. But more to the point, we try to change their minds. And the reason we try to change their minds is not because we think they haven't had enough of a good life yet. The reason we try to change their minds is because we think they can have a good life going forward. Now, I've never wronged the Samaritans, but I'm pretty bloody sure that if you do, then the first question they ask you is not your date of birth, so that they can put the phone down if you're over 80. It's just not like that. We care about people's lives, irrespective of how long ago they were born. And I don't see that changing.
Let's do another fun one. Overpopulation. This is the one you get asked all the time. Aren't we already overburdened by people? Won't we have too many people? And look, your counter argument is that you perceive that technology is going to increase the carrying capacity of the planet. Could you just explain
Very good.
your argument for why overpopulation is bollocks as well?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, of course, there are other reasons why it's bollocks. You know, the fact that fertility rates are plummeting and people will have fewer kids or have their kids less frequently when they know they're going to live a long time and so on. But yes, the advance of other technologies is is the strongest answer in my view. The fact is, there is no such thing as overpopulation in an absolute sense. What we mean when we say that there are too many people on the planet is that the number of people on the planet is such that the environment is suffering. And that is because not of the people, but because of the pollution generated by the people. So clearly, the more we can reduce that pollution, the less overpopulation we have. And if we look at what that pollution consists of course, it's obvious, right? Climate change, big deal right now. It comes from the fact that we burn all this bloody fossil fuel. And the reason we burn it is because we're not very good at renewable energy yet. But we're getting better all the time. Even better than that, we're not getting better because we care about climate change. We're getting better because it turns out that we can make solar energy, for example, more cheaply if we just work a little bit more than we can fossil fuels. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that happens across the board, whether it's artificial meat, whether it's, desalination, all of these things are coming really fast, way before the technology that I work on has had any impact, or even probably before it's even been developed. We're going to have a world in which the carrying capacity of the planet, in other words, the number of people we can have on the planet with an acceptable level of environmental impact, will be going up far faster than the actual population of the planet could go up, even in the complete absence of all death.
This one's everybody's favorite, Aubrey. What about the inequality of access? Will you only be given the innovations that Sen's Foundation creates to the rich people at Silicon Valley, or how will the rest of us get access to it?
My favorite, in terms of my jaded view of all this bullshit, is that the same fucking people in consecutive breaths will voice the overpopulation objection and also the inequality of access objection. Completely not understanding. I mean, these are people with IQs more than 10, right? People just not seeing that these things are mutually exclusive. You know, that you can't have overpopulation if only a few people are getting the fucking...
Of course, Aubrey, because all the rich people will be on Elon Musk's plane to Mars living forever on that planet and not this one.
But
so it should be fine.
Even if they're down here, there's only a few of them and they can only have a finite number. So anyway.
But to that question, the inequality of access,
right.
look,
So
is this thing actually going to have trickle-down economics as part of it? Are we going to see trickle-down with regards to this technology, or is it always going to be the privileges of
It's very important, but it's much better than trickle-down. It's not just a case of, iPhones will get cheaper, that will certainly happen, but the point is, even when these technologies first come along and they're really pretty expensive to develop and to deliver, nevertheless, that expense will still pale into insignificance relative to the savings, the amount of money that the economy will benefit from in terms of the avoidance of all the medical care we currently have to provide to people who are sick, because people won't be getting sick, and also, of course, the indirect costs, the fact that the kids of the elderly will be so much more productive because they won't be looking after their sick parents, the fact that the elderly themselves will be still contributing wealth to society. All of these things will, however you look at it, irrespective of what particular structure the society has, how capitalist it is, how tax-friendly it is, all of these things will be completely irrelevant in any country. It will be completely, even ignoring the humanitarian imperative entirely, it will be utterly economically mandated. You'll go bankrupt if you don't do it. And of course, people don't see this because what their natural inclination is to think that the right precedent to look at is today's high-tech medicine. But it isn't. And the reason it isn't is because today's high-tech medicine, which is, of course, overwhelmingly for the elderly, In case you hadn't noticed, it doesn't work. We just end up spending a lot of money, and the people get sick anyway, or not long after they would have otherwise done, and you end up spending the same amount of money as you otherwise would have done. So the economic arithmetic is negative. That simply isn't going to be the case when the medicine does work. So the only precedent that we can look at right now, and it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good one, is basic education. Even in a repulsively tax-averse society like the USA, basic education is free. I mean, pretty basic, yes, but it's free. And the reason it's free is this reason, that if you don't do that, then 20 years down the road, you're going to be bankrupt because your workforce isn't going to know what to do.
The last one, Aubrey, affects your industry specifically. So quite famously, the physicist Max Planck said that science advances one funeral at a time. And similarly, Thomas Kuhn argued in Structure of the Scientific Revolutions that revolutionary progress only happens when generations die. In other words, the death of one generation is essential for progress to occur. In actual fact, in this whole field, it only may advance if some generations die and new thinking comes into it. So how...
Oh, we totally need turnover of thinking. The question is whether we need turnover of individuals. So, I mean, look, I have become a world leader in the field of gerontology. But if I hadn't met the right woman at the right time, I would probably still be an artificial intelligence researcher. And when I was very much a proponent of what used to be called good old-fashioned AI, the symbolic approach to figuring out how to get computers to be smarter than us just by getting them to understand, to do what they do well, to do logic. Now, as of today, we see that the enormous, just breathtaking breakthroughs that are being made are as a result of the successes that have occurred in the competing paradigm, the neural net kind of paradigm. I might very well have, impeded that if I had stayed in AI. I could easily have ended up, as of today, being just as prominent in AI as I am in gerontology today, and I might have been a fossil, the dinosaur getting in the way.
AI is big right now. You could have done a very good speaking career with AI, Aubrey. I'm sure you would have been lining up with
I don't know.
Max Tegmark.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that I would have been open-minded enough, but I don't know. So I believe that changes of career are very important, and that's not going to change. But it sure as hell doesn't mean people have to die.
Or more importantly then, so if we look at just genetic imperative, we have the same sorts of genetically non-diverse people populating this planet. Are we going to leave ourselves exposed? If we really race towards a post-Darwinist ideal whereby we don't pass genes onto generations and allow for new generations to emerge, are we going to end up in a situation where one virus is going to wipe us all out because it's been the same sort of genetics on this earth for a heck of a long time?
So first thing, when people when there's no turnover at all, in the extreme example of what you're saying, where there's just no death and no birth, which of course is not going to be the actual situation, but let's just take that as the extreme, then it's not as if the genetic diversity of the species diminishes, it just stays the same, right? So still, we're in no greater danger of some pandemic wiping us all out in one go than we are today. Secondly, we're going to care rather a lot more. One of the absolute scandals of today's society is the pitiful amount of money that is spent on vaccine research. And the reason there's so pitiful an amount is, number one, it doesn't make money. Number two, and essentially the reason why it doesn't make money is that hardly anybody in government in the West dies of pandemics. Now, hardly anybody has HIV, as far as we know, right, in government, right? Whereas everybody has aging. So I don't think we're going to have that problem. I think people are going to be very keen to work much harder than we can today to prevent, to preempt, to anticipate any of those kinds of problems. And it's not as if the technology is not there. We can totally do that.
I suppose my final concern, Aubrey, is we already have radical life-extending technologies, and these are called sanitation, they're called education, they're called regulation, they're called contraception, they're called universal healthcare, they're called clean water, participatory economics, and participatory political systems. Instead of talking about fictional potential future technologies, should we actually be putting our attention towards these things to ensure our future?
So since you said that that's your last question, I want to preface my answer by congratulating you on asking all these questions as if you actually didn't know the answers. It was very good. Since I was so insulting at the beginning, I thought I was.
All right, okay. We're trying to create a performance, Aubrey. We're trying to.
So.
But look, answer me on that one. Why aren't we focused on the things that actually fucking matter today, as opposed to this fictional technology and mind uploading and all this stuff that may or may not happen?
Yeah, right. So I I often get asked, why don't you write to Bill Gates and get money? He's technically aware, he must understand the value of all this and so on. And the fact is, I don't want Bill Gates' money. The reason I don't want his money is because he's gone out there and he's made perfectly clear that his personal priority is to spend his money on the disadvantaged, on the people in sub-Saharan Africa who don't have mosquito nets and so on and so forth. And I am fine with that. I believe that it's absolutely essential for us to do everything we can to improve the quality of life, the standard of living and everything of the trailing edge of humanity. The only thing I say is that, thank God, there are also people like Peter Thiel who feel that it's also important to push forward the leading edge of humanity. Because at the end of the day, if you only push the trailing edge, eventually it's going to butt up against the leading edge and everyone's stuck. So for me, you have to do both. And it's not as if there's any real zero-sum game there. The fact is, different problems exist in the two cases. Different people are positioned to do something about them. Different expertise is involved. So it's absolutely not the case that we have to choose.